Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Through the Keyhole, the show that walks right in and makes itself at home by the firesides of the famous. Tonight, as always, we've borrowed the keys to two fascinating homes belonging to well-known personalities, and with the help of the sainted Lloyd Grossman, our beloved house detective, we'll be taking a privileged peep behind closed doors. The only question is, whose? Well, to try and answer that question, we have an inspired mix of the functional and the elegant. Our first panellist can talk for hours on any given subject, and days if she knows anything about it. The femme fatale of Fleet Street, Miss Nina Mishkoff. Our second panellist began his career by working on no fewer than 6 stations, 4 radio and 2 petrol. Mr. Nicky Campbell. With nearly 2,000 appearances on Countdown, our third panellist has handled more letters than Postman Pat. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please rearrange the following words into a well-known phrase or saying? Welcome, please, Vorderman Carroll. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the game. With the aid of these old magic keys here, we're going to be taking a careful look inside 2 fascinating homes. And that should tell us something, maybe quite a lot, about the person or persons who live there. All our friends over here have got to do is to work out who that is. So let's join Lloyd right now at house number 1. And watch closely, because remember, the clues are there as we go through the keyhole.
This little entrance hall is perfect for a couple who like mucking around in bad weather. It's got a wonderful, sturdy, weatherproof floor here, a huge array of umbrellas, and all these sort of dry bones, ideal things for tramping around in the rain and the sleet and the snow. Now, most people have pin-ups on their pin boards, either of a favorite holiday resort or of one of their idols or something, but this person's a real foodie because they've got a rather sexy photograph of some olive oil. Here in this very cozy drawing room, the books show a real love of food and drink as well. Look, we've got classic Chinese cuisine and the rather serious-looking Wine Atlas of France and Traveller's Guide. Now, this is the oldest part of the house, and in spite of all these rather jazzy modern pictures, it has a great traditional cottagey feel, helped largely by this vast 17th century stone hearth. Now, there are exotic touches in this room as well, like the fabric on this bench. It's got a sort of Indonesian Oriental feel to it, and I think that these people love traveling. They've certainly got a whole basket full of travel books. They've been to Ireland, they've been to Beijing, they've been all over the place. Travel is obviously a great hobby with them. And they've picked up quite a few things along the way as well. There are lots of Oriental knickknacks scattered about. But basically, their hearts are still here at home, and there are wonderful cottagey touches in this room, like these bunches of lavender. This is a nice and big eat-in kitchen. It's got a dining table that seats at least 6 people, and it shows that cooking in this house is a real sort of social event. Guests are supposed to be interested in it, maybe even to join in as well. Now, this is very much a serious cook's kitchen. We, of course, have the statutory Aga in a wonderful shade of green, this one, but also an electric hob, so all sorts of cooking can take place here. There's an interest in exotic and high-class ingredients, so there are lots of trendy things here, like raspberry vinegar, cumin seed, capers, wild rice, and lots of stuff that's evocative of the south of France and the Mediterranean. Great strings of garlic, red chilies, and terrific loads of ingredients, herbs and spices, all in these wonderful Provençal crocs. There's a great collection here of decorative doorstops, and they all hint at the sunny south as well. There's an orange tree, and there's some Van Goghian sunflowers. There's plenty of enthralling reading material here in the bedroom. There's evidence of a taste for rather highbrow contemporary English literature. We've got books by Julian Barnes and Anita Bruckner. And then over here, there's a Welsh dictionary and surprisingly glossy magazines. I say surprisingly because this room seems so cottagey. You don't expect someone who lives here to be switched into the Vogue scene. But in fact, this bedroom has lots of rather stylish touches, like these very smart paper lampshades with ribbons around them. So whoever lives here is very conscious of style and design and fashion. There are more hints here of some sort of love of Wales. There are two splendid paintings, one of back-to-back cottages in a Welsh village, and the other one of the well-known Mumbles Pier in South Wales. Now let's look at the evidence. The sunny doorstop, the Provençal flavors, the Welsh lexicon. Who lives in a house like this? David, it's over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lloyd. And now for our home and studio audience, but not for our panel. Here's whose house it is. Not easy, and I must say, Lloyd's idea of evidence in this particular one, well, you're on your own here, I think. Nina, good luck.
Thank you, David. Well, I haven't a clue whose house it is, but I'd love to be invited as a guest, particularly for dinner, because it looks like it would be absolutely wonderful. I think there's a lovely feel to the place, and I love the whole Provençal touch, that sort of the sunny south of France. So is this a professional traveller of any kind?
No, it's not really.
Somebody connected with journalism, perhaps, or news? Or cookery? She said in desperation.
Yes, well, I think connected with journalism and news, I think that we ought to give you a sporadic...
What, a half ripple?
A sporadic ripple of applause. Nikki.
A raspberry ripple.
There it is. There it is. And there it is, the sporadic ripple, which is also to welcome you to the programme.
Well, great to be here, David. Yeah, connected with journalism would lead me on to a clue I don't think anyone else, well, Lloyd certainly didn't make mention of it. On the kitchen table there was a bowl full of lemons. So this person is obviously, if they're at all connected with journalism, an avid drinker of gin and tonic. An avid drinker, perhaps.
Ah, now that's a very interesting question. We'll have to ask her when she comes out.
It's, yeah, a tough one there. It's a beautiful taste, the house. What do I know about taste? But I was rather worried that, you know, what does one
no,
say
I think you're right. It is a lovely feel.
You'd like to be invited too. Maybe the two of you could go together. Carol, what do you think?
I would say that it's a fairly young couple, possibly involved definitely in the media. It could be in advertising.
It's the woman we're looking for. It's not advertising, but you've got media, and the audience are absolutely right there.
Yeah. Now, Nina, having tried cookery, holidays, virtually everything else, extremely difficult.
Now, it is very difficult.
The Welsh side, now that interested me.
What?
The Welsh side of it. Because coming from Wales, you tend to notice, if we're talking about television personalities who might be involved, so that's really starting to lead me down. Wouldn't be anybody to do with weather, possibly?
Carry on, Carol. How did you get to that? It's brilliant.
Well, it's only because there are so very few Welsh clues that are ever given. Yeah. And when you sit at home and you see Welsh people on the television, you tend to log them down.
Right, so name the name.
I think it's Sian Lloyd.
You're absolutely right. Will you come through the keyhole? Sian Lloyd. Come and sit down. Now that was by way of being a master, or indeed a mistress stroke there from Carol. I mean, wasn't it? Because there weren't a lot of clues in Lloyd's film.
No, I thought the clues were a bit dubious, if Lloyd doesn't mind me saying that.
No, Lloyd's not here. You can say whatever you like.
Because the food thing isn't obvious in connection with me at all. I think Lloyd's own preferences...
Now, you're going to do a food series later, though, aren't you?
I've done a food series with BBC Wales, so I don't know whether you've seen that.
Okay, no, I haven't seen that.
What about all those lemons on the table? Was I whistling in the dark there?
I make lots of salad dressings with lots of olive oil and lemon juice. So that's what the lemons were, not gin and tonics.
More's the pity.
You won one award for the world's best female weather forecaster. That's
yes,
not a bad award.
Yes, that was quite a shock for me, quite a surprise, but lovely. We went out to Paris a weather festival in Paris. And presenters, presenters from around the world came, from Cuba and the States and China. And I was lucky enough to pick up the Presenters Award.
Oh, that's fantastic. What about the chewing gum incident? That's one of the legendary. What exactly happened?
Well, it was a live bulletin, as it is, and ITN cameras came to me a smidgen early. And I always, before doing a weather forecast, put a piece of chewing gum in my mouth to freshen my mouth. And the cameras came to me early. Of course, I stood there chewing gum. I had to get rid of it. You can't talk when you've got a mouthful of chewing gum.
And did the cameras actually catch you getting rid of it, or...?
Well, I thought I'd sneakily turn to the weather map and spit it out on the floor. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, and I actually spat it in the middle of Wales, mid-Wales.
And, of course, the other thing weather forecasts have to learn to do is to do these wonderful hand movements when they can't see what's behind them.
You don't see a thing.
The vague movements, don't they?
This is why we use such large hands, because a hand that size covers a lot of geographical area.
Because it's just a blank screen behind you, isn't it?
Absolutely nothing.
And so that's why people say, and over here in East Anglia, but you never say in Norwich, because you couldn't possibly...
But the worst thing for a female forecaster is the shoes. Now, if I've got heels on, the northwest of Scotland is fine, I can manage it. If I've got flat shoes on, it's a real stretch.
So they don't get a forecast on that occasion. So are you going to branch out into more cooking things?
I hope to. That's the other passion of my life, food. And I think I'm happiest of all when I can combine the two, the food and the weather. If I can eat a meal al fresco, wow, am I happy.
And you've got this tremendous advantage of knowing when you can go al fresco and when you can't.
Doesn't always work out.
Are you better on the weather than other people, or do you get caught like everybody else?
I get caught
with a barbecue
with a
in it suddenly. Yeah. Well, we have here a souvenir for your home, which Nina and Nikki are looking forward to an invitation to. And
Thank you.
There it is, the Through the Keyhole key, as a souvenir of us saying thanks ever so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. We'll take a break. I wonder who's next. Thank you, and welcome back to Through the Keyhole with Lloyd Grossman, the home sleuth, in search of the home truth. So let's join Lloyd right now at house number 2 as we go through the keyhole.
Through the front door, and it's straight into the kitchen, where you're faced with a huge array of tea, running the gamut from the familiarity of Darjeeling to the esoterica of mango indica. And unsurprisingly, there are plenty of mugs to drink that tea from. And they all have a slightly sort of dawnish nature to them. Now, whoever cooks in this kitchen is a very particular person, perhaps slightly finicky. Everything has to be just so. Look at the way the spices, for example, are labeled with the date that they were dried. Now, the whole room is presided over by a vivid, near-classical rendition of the final scene from A Winter's Tale. So someone here perhaps has a slightly dramatic character. Leaving the kitchen, which is long and low, you suddenly come into this vast room. It's got beautiful walls made out of this honey-colored Horton stone and very heavy rafters and timber framing. So you can probably guess that it was a barn of immemorial antiquity. It's got all sorts of interesting bits and bobs built into it, like this 17th century sundial. And the front of the balcony is faced with a Gothic Revival altar rail. Well, you don't often see one of these. This is a clavichord, which is an early and very elegant form of keyboard. Perhaps slightly out of tune, although that's more likely to be my fingers. You also don't often see houses that have Victorian American organs, or indeed 2 grand pianos. So this is a very musical kind of place. There are heaps of music everywhere. Most of it is devotional music, church music, but the atmosphere here isn't one of sort of somberness. These people have a great sense of humor and an even greater collection of teddy bears. This study has a wall of well-regimented Redoute rose prints, and there's been a major outbreak of bustophilia here. Look, there's an Egyptian queen, there's a local boy made good, and there's the Emperor Augustus wearing a mortarboard. Now, whoever lives here is obviously an omnivorous reader. There are books on all sorts of subjects here, particularly fine collection of books on the heroic day of the wireless. So we've got the Radio Listeners Weekend book, for example, or Hello Boys, the Wireless Uncle's Annual, and even a book on the wireless stars. Then, of course, there are much more conventional things, huge collection of books on poetry. Now, this is an ideal desk for a slightly laid-back writer. There's a chaise longue, and there's a low-level shelf full of key reference books. And I see that whoever lives here is planning a rustic holiday. This knick-knackscape reveals a marked fondness for pigs. There's a little walking pig, there's a micro-miniature pig, and there's a shockingly pink pig. There's also a trio of hedgehogs and a very jolly farmer with his dog. And it's slightly shocking to find amidst this ode to the joys of the bucolic life an old-fashioned radio microphone. Let's look at the evidence. The organ music, the rural retreat, the wireless days. Who lives in a house like this? David, it's over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lloyd. And now for our home and studio audience, here's whose house it is. Right, it's our ace investigator starting off. Carol?
Yes, I think that was just a lucky draw, actually, last time. It was an extremely interesting house, I thought. I love the gallery in the barn. Fantastic filling of space there. I really enjoy rooms like that. But it was, I thought, by the arrangement of things and the pieces which were in the house, that we're probably looking at a man and an older man, I would say. Also, the rural retreat, as Lloyd said, that was one of his themes. And obviously the wireless, again, something to do with radio. I thought with the musical things and the church music around, it could have been somebody who hosts songs of praise, but obviously that wasn't that wasn't the right thing to think.
Right, no, well, very good start. Nicky, what did you think?
Well, I don't think this person is Welsh, from the fact that Carol doesn't seem to know who it is.
Right.
Obviously, well, radio, obviously somebody who might be in radio and is obsessed with organs. Because of those two clues, I did think Tony Blackburn, but obviously not. Yeah, that wonderful room there. And also, I did notice on one of the coffee mugs, I think, there was a reference to Oxford University. And there seemed to be a real sort of classical education about this.
Right, Nina?
I haven't a clue. It's obviously a very academic, learned household. All those books, all that classical music, and the rose prints. What saved it for me were the teddy bears and the pigs, because until then it could have looked, for all its grandeur, rather sort of dusty and dry. So there's a sort of cuddly aspect to it as well, which I was glad to see. But I'm no further forward, although the radio must have something to do with it.
It certainly does. Certainly does. And pigs, too.
And pigs. Well, this, you see, and you saying cuddly. Now, this is leading me on to, and there was a dramatic element in there with the Winter's Tale. And radio, pigs and drama can only mean one programme.
Well, you have got it again, have you?
Well, it's got to be the Archers.
Yes. Yes.
I'm saying it's an older gentleman
Pardon?
who's very learned.
Yeah.
And who enjoys poetry. It's got to be Phil Archer, I reckon, which is
Norman Painting, yeah? Will you come through the keyhole? Norman Painting, alias Phil Archer. Lovely to see you, Norman.
Thanks very much.
Come and sit down. Well, they got their inspector, chief inspector, Vorderman there.
Yes, I might have known.
Landed you there.
That's what comes of being on countdown in these studios, you see.
Yes, that's right. And where do the teddy bears that Nina likes so much come
Well,
from?
unlike Philip Archer and unlike my radio mum, I've not been married, but I do get visited regularly by the children. That's to say, I was a resident uncle, and then my niece, who is now married and got a family, arrives usually at half-term with the 2 small children, one who had his 8th birthday with me last week, and a 5-year-old. And I used to get these toys for them and suddenly realized it did look a bit Freudian because I got them all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I suddenly thought it much simpler to put them all into one armchair, and then people could think what they like.
Now, obviously you're still on trial as Phil Archer,
Yes.
but you're hoping to get the job permanently, are you?
Well, it would be nice to have a contract, yes.
It would, yes. Because so far the trials lasted how long?
Well, I first played the part in May 1950, David, you see. But they still book us by the 2.5-hour session, you see.
Do they?
Yes,
Do they really?
Yes, really.
But that's why he's in the Guinness Book of Records, isn't it?
That's
It's
right.
the longest time anyone's ever played the same role on radio.
Or in their rather inelegant language, I think they've changed it now, I was described as the world's most durable radio actor. Made me sound like a sort of saucepan or something.
Oh yes, a saucepan rather than an artiste.
Indeed.
But actually you've written 1,200 of them or so, haven't you, as well?
Yes, just about.
And I mean, how has he since 1950-51, has Phil Archer aged 42 years, or has he really aged about 27 or what? I mean, does he age by the...
I think the snag is, you see, that he's aged, but my voice hasn't. And so I have to do it not so much by vocal tricks as using an old-fashioned word, acting. So I have to sound like an old man, but not necessarily go like that, otherwise it's phony.
How old is Phil Archer today?
Phil Archer is 2 years younger than I am.
In other words?
Oh, he's about 65, 66.
Yes, and he's got a grandchild.
Just, yes. Somebody said to me the other day, how does it feel to be a grandfather? I said, well, don't knock it. We waited long enough for it. And so,
Incidentally, the thing that fascinated me about the house is, what happens to a sundial when it's indoors?
it was there when I bought the place, and it was only discovered when the walls were cleaned and treated. Because although it's an interior stone wall, every bit of it has been, first of all, cleaned, and then pointed up, and then covered with a kind of plastic sealant, so that one isn't living quite in a pigsty. And doing that, we discovered among the cobwebs there was this thing, which must have been put there sometime after 1667, and that's all we know.
Well, it looks great. And here is the Through the Keyhole key as our token of our thanks for your being with us. Thank you very much indeed. And the next 42 years, may they be as fruitful.
And with a contract.
And with a contract. To go with it. Thank you very much. Our thanks to Norman Painting and, of course, to Sean Lloyd. And our thanks to Nina Mishkov. Our thanks to Nicky Campbell and to Carol Vorderman. Until the next time, goodbye for now.
There's some disturbing news for Jim MacDonald in Friday's Coronation Street. Stay tuned.